It's mid-July and it is berry season. Today we are actually out, I guess this is our third or fourth day of harvest already, but we're out harvesting raspberries. It's middle of July and kind of got thinking about a few things here with this. One, we kind of wanted to show you a bit of an update on our Killarney raspberry patch to sort of show, I guess, in year two what it looks like because it's pretty impressive.
It's potential.
The other thing we wanted to touch on is fruit in general is a very high value crop, food item that sometimes gets overshadowed a little bit by annual vegetables and things that have a quicker turnaround. But all you have to do is get your patch of X started and it's amazing what it does for you in the long term. And so this video is specific to raspberries because honestly I think if you have some space, they are something that you can have variety. They produce a ton and they're very low maintenance. In fact, the maintenance is usually less about keeping them alive as keeping them contained. So we're going to take you for a little tour and discussion on raspberries. Well, just scan around here. This is our patch of Killarney raspberries that we planted in the spring of 2021. We'll link the video for that up above to kind of show how we prepared it and everything else. But as you can see, there's a ton of growth on these. Now, we planted about 150 plants. We ordered 150 plants and we got a few extras. So there may be a few more in here. But as I kind of move down here, despite all the luscious looking foliage, you can see last year's growth is loaded with berries. As a bit of a recap, Killarney raspberries are red raspberries, so there are multiple species of raspberry. In fruit production, in a way, and I'll quantify this in a second, they really produce kind of the equivalent of like a biannual. They produce their fruit on their second year canes. So as you can see behind me, we've got a lot of fruit on a lot of second year canes. 2023's harvest is going to be likely astronomical off of this patch. And I guess what we wanted to emphasize was, yes, it was an investment and it was work and it was an area to put them, but like I say, 150 raspberry transplants. We spent approximately $400-ish Canadian. This will produce for years and years and years thousands of dollars worth of raspberries, which are a higher value food item. We can propagate from them by taking clones. We can expand the patch if we want to. Essentially, by that outlay, this is a good example where you can get a massive amount of production, and in the case of raspberries, you get it pretty quick. So a good example of what I mean about the propagation is in the case of these red raspberries. We have one here that essentially the roots or the rhizomes have jumped out of the bed that we've prepared and is growing in the middle of the path. Now, it's not the right time of day to be doing this, but if we wanted to dig that up, we could use it, and there are a few others, to expand our patch if we so desired. And that's a pretty big thing, to be able to propagate perennials. Propagating annuals is important, but propagating perennials really has that super long-term sustainability outlook to it. And of course, some of the nice things about raspberries are, like I say, from a maintenance perspective, if you put them in a location that they like, they're pretty low maintenance. What we did here is not necessarily what everybody's going to do. You could propagate from a smaller number of individuals, and I'll show you something in a minute that is exactly that case. But the point I'm trying to illustrate here is perennials can do amazing things for you if you focus and sort of try to make a sizable patch. In a very short period of time, you can see some extreme returns on that investment of time, money, and energy.
So there is our pickings for today. We're going to take that in and weigh it just to find out how much we got in one day. But as you can see, we're going to have to pick again tomorrow. But I like them to taste super ripe. So we'll be back again tomorrow to pick all over again.
Now, as I leave that patch of Killarney Red Raspberries, which the Killarneys are a domesticated version of the wild red raspberry. They definitely produce a much larger fruit, and I think on the red raspberry front, this is my opinion, you are better to go with sort of a named variety or a domesticated variety. It doesn't necessarily have to be named, but basically because your production is going to be a lot greater than what you're going to get off the wild red raspberries. Not that the wild red raspberries aren't completely edible, but what I'm about to show you here in a second is something that basically is completely wild, and for many of us in Eastern North America is a bit of an overlooked or underappreciated or just kind of forgotten species of raspberry. And that is the black raspberry, which is a completely different species from the red raspberry, and shouldn't be confused with blackberries because they have very different growth habits and, in my opinion, very different tastes. So these black raspberries are smaller. This is basically a wild plant. There are some domesticated cultivars, but when they're ripe, they turn from normal red color to a nice deep purpley black, and they produce a lot. Now, this is something that you can just pick wild, or you can sort of semi-domesticate or tend, I guess would be the better way to put it. This is a wild edible that is found quite widespread across Eastern North America, that if you bring it into your garden, you can do amazing things with it, and it will produce, as you can see, a lot of fruit for you. Now, this species is a little more formidable, i.e. has a lot bigger thorns than the red raspberries, even the wild red raspberries. So something to consider. It's not something that you necessarily want to put where you have to deal with it regularly. This is a great plant to sort of put to the edge of the garden or in a naturalized area or a food forest or that kind of thing. And it can be propagated too. And what's interesting about that is you can propagate the wild plants. And like I say, if you bring them into the garden and tend them, feed them, that sort of things, they will, as you can see in these bushes behind me, they'll grow into monsters. And if they grow into monsters, then you're going to get a lot of berries. So this patch was actually present here in this location when we moved to this house, moved to this property. And we are getting to the point that this fall or late this summer, we are going to have to propagate this a little bit, clone it. And we're seriously considering moving some of the canes to a new location because, frankly, we like this berry. They're extremely flavorful, and we also want to keep it manageable because it's starting to get to the point that because of the thorns, we can't get back into it as well as we would like. So like the red raspberries, there is some tending, things like mulch, that sort of thing, and removing old canes. You definitely want to try to do that on any patch that you're sort of trying to get fairly decent production out of, because leaving those old canes in place can, not necessarily always, but can increase the likelihood of you getting sort of a disease or a virus that may reduce your fruit set or fruit production. So definitely a yearly thing you want to do, but again, it's not complicated and not very hard for what you get out of it. So I've kind of shown sort of two big options for, I guess, starting a raspberry patch. One, you could purchase a lot of plants from a mail order nursery or that sort of thing. Like I said, our Killarney Red Raspberries came bare root. It was an awesome experience. The company we got them from, although this is not an endorsement, was great to work with, and we're extremely happy with the results. And realistically, we got a lot of plants for sort of a low price for each individual plant, even though the whole patch had a higher price tag. We've also looked at the black raspberries, which different species. Although you can buy cultivated varieties of it, they're a little less common than the red raspberry cultivars. However, if you live in Eastern North America, there's a pretty good chance that you can find this plant either growing on your property or somewhere nearby that you might be able to propagate it and bring it into your garden. So essentially you could get that one for free. But the last variety of raspberry, and this is where I think raspberries are interesting for the variety, because you can have different flavors, i.e. the Killarney and the black raspberries taste very different from one another, and this third variety tastes and looks different again. But this patch was started in a different way, which is probably a little bit more accessible to people. I.e., what we did was we bought a smaller number of plants at a higher price per plant, but we basically planted a smaller patch and have let it sort of do its thing. But as you will see, this patch, which is 3 years old, so keep that in mind, it was started with some plants that were a little bit sketchy. Let's just say they weren't in the best of shape. They were end of season sales and that sort of thing. 3 years old, and it's getting to that point that we can absolutely this fall sort of start a second patch. So in 3 years we've gone from planting and getting no fruit year 1, getting a little bit of fruit year 2, and now we're starting to get a lot of fruit, and we can already propagate this perennial. So this completely tangled mess of canes and stinging nettle in the foreground there, but in the background these are our yellow raspberries. So this is a mix. We have some Ann raspberries and some early gold raspberries that we planted here because we wanted a yellow patch. We like the yellow raspberries, and this is not something that you can usually easily get, so kind of a unique fruit. There's one of those characteristic yellow raspberries. Not quite ripe. I picked from this patch this morning, but in year 3, this is an ever-bearing variety, so different again from the other two that we have. But in year 3, we're starting to get a fair bit of production, and this variety, which is a domesticated, altered form, altered as in selectively bred, not GMO or anything, but an altered form of the wild red raspberry, is an ever-bearing variety, so this will kind of continue to produce for us. You can see the wooden bed in here, because we wanted to try to contain it, but the rhizomes have jumped the bed, and we have quite a few plants growing outside of it, so the plan is, when these go dormant, we are going to dig some up and sort of start a second bed. But all of this growth, again, way outside the bed, but all of this growth is only 3 years worth. So year 1 was planting, these weren't bare root, they were potted stock. Year 2 was kind of just some growth, and as you can see, year 2 led to some pretty vigorous growth because these things have just gone wild. But the variety is well worth it. That's pretty much our raspberry video for this year. A little bit of an update, I guess, on how some of our patches are doing. But we thought this was a good opportunity to look at the difference between some of them and how this very familiar plant, or couple of species of plants, can really do a lot for you as far as a fairly valuable end product with relatively little effort. Your biggest part of effort is going to be purchasing the plants / finding the plants and planting them and figuring out where you want to plant them, because once you have a patch in place, it's going to be there for quite a while. On that note, hopefully you, if you've got some space, you give raspberries a try if you haven't already, because if you can propagate yourself a decent sized patch like the one behind me, you can put away a lot of fruit, which is very healthy. And basically, you know, everything breaks the supply chains, local, organic, whatever tag you want to put on that, basically homegrown fruit. You can easily produce a ton, not necessarily a ton, but a large volume of fruit yourself with raspberries.